Hey, TechUDad here, and tonight I'd like to take you through a very basic JavaScript tutorial where we learn how to tie a JavaScript function into an HTML page. Now it takes very little base knowledge to get started here, and I'm not going to go into all the details of HTML in this lesson, but feel free to follow along, there's going to be more to come. So for starters, we have our HTML page. This is just a file with a .html on the end. You can even do this with a simple text editor. I like to use VS Code. It's free. It's a Microsoft product, and it's actually worth the download. And they have a version for Mac as well, which is what I'm running right here. So without going into tons of detail on how HTML works, I'll do that in another lesson. This is the base element set for an HTML page. It comes up usually when you say File, New, HTML file. This is what you're headed for. If you want more details on this, I highly recommend W3 Schools and walkthroughs on HTML. And of course, like I said, I'll try to do a little bit more of that later. But for today's example, I'm going to take this HTML page and I'm going to change it by writing a function in a JavaScript file. So for starters, I need a way to tie this HTML page to my JavaScript file, and to do that I need to type a script tag. I'm going to do that inside of my head tag here. The reason for doing so is so that it loads right up at the top. I'm going to say test.js because that's the name of the file, and if you are doing this along with me, make sure that your file for JavaScript is in the same place where your HTML file is. So I wrote a script tag and set the property of source to test.js. That points it right over here at this file right here. Now I'm going to create an element inside of the body of the HTML. This is where the elements inside of our code actually show up in the browser without going into too much detail. I'm going to add a div. A div is a section of HTML code that has base or very little pre-built design code for it, and that's why I use a lot of divs. I use a lot of raw base HTML in my coding examples. You're welcome to move on and use HTML5 type elements and things like that. We'll do a lot of this for you in cool ways, but we're going to stick to the basics for this example. So I have a div and I'm going to add a property called ID. The ID I'm going to give it is container. I can make that up, call it whatever I want. It's obviously a good idea to make it a simple name. Don't call it your mom's a pickle or something really stupid. Call it something that you're going to use it for so that when you get over to your JavaScript you remember what you called it and why you called it that. So I have this container and I don't have anything inside of it. It's empty. So if I were to load this inside of a web browser, I would not get anything to display on my page because there's nothing inside the actual content. There's no text here. Normally if I were to add text, I'd type the text like this. But we're going to add text to this container using our JavaScript file. But now we're all ready to get that plugged in. So my next step is to come here to my body tag, and I'm going to call onLoad. OnLoad is an event that occurs when the page is finished loading. When the HTML is all ready to go, it's pulled in all of its sources, pulled in all of its content, it will call this method. And this method could call a function that I later define here in my JavaScript file, and that's what we're going to do. A function is a process of code. That process is going to perform something for us, and in this case we're going to add text into this container using JavaScript. So on load, I'm going to say run code. I just made up that function name and added a couple parentheses on the end. Again, if you want to see a little bit more about JavaScript syntax and functions, I highly recommend W3 Schools to get a little further depth on that. So run code has not been defined yet. We'll go over here to our test.js and define that now. So here I am in my test.js. I'm going to write function, run code, open close parentheses like I did on the other side, and now we need to go and get this container by its ID name. We're going to be using vanilla JavaScript, which means base JavaScript with no other libraries pulled in. It means that you can do it right here along with me without any additional resources pulled in. You just need a text editor to edit your HTML and your JavaScript, and then we'll load it in a browser. So vanilla JavaScript, my reference to the document or to my HTML page is document, that's how I'm going to get to my index file. Document.getElement by ID. I'm telling it to go and fetch this element by the ID of container. So now I'm going to add the parameter that tells it what ID to go and get. And of course I've named it container. And the value I need to talk to, or I should say the property I need to talk to inside of container is innerHTML. And I'm going to set that right there with the equal sign, and we're going to type hello world. I know, it's cliche. A lot of people like to write yo or foo or foobar. That's a pretty common one amongst the development world. And there you have it. One of your first JavaScript hello worlds. We're going to be inserting this phrase into this section of our code. And we're actually all set to go. That was the last piece we needed to tie this function here. Remember, it's all tied in because our HTML loads this script, and this script, when this HTML page is loaded, can see our container. It goes and gets the container right here, and it adds the text hello world to it. So now if I were to run this inside of a browser, I get hello world right there. And taking that step further in Chrome, I love Chrome tools. If you're a developer, you should be using Chrome tools. That's just kind of a standard. And I'm looking at my container and it says hello world, and you can see that's different from what's actually in my HTML. See, in my HTML it doesn't actually say anything in it, but my browser, it does show that that got inserted inside the actual window right there. And that's our first example. So there you have it. Thanks for watching. This has been a really simple explanation of how to connect your JavaScript function up to your HTML page. And be sure to subscribe. If you got friends trying to learn code, you got yourself trying to learn code, I recommend following along. I'm going to take you through a lot of really fun tutorials. We're going to do some interaction stuff. I'm going to do a lot of design stuff. It's going to be worth the ride. See you next time.